Claire Bennett set the leather bill folder beside Vincent Moretti's hand, circled the message in red ink, and held his gaze long enough for him to read it. Gunman behind you. Exit now. Vincent's fingers stopped above his untouched coffee. Claire did not look toward the mirrored wall behind him. She reached instead for his water glass, as though correcting an ordinary mistake, while the reflection caught a man near the bar sliding one hand beneath his coat. Vincent's eyes moved once, from the warning to Claire's face. No panic. No plea for gratitude. Only a tiny tightening at the corner of her mouth as footsteps crossed the marble floor behind her. She had given him the warning. Now she had to remain beside the table and pretend she had not. Is there a problem with the bill? Vincent asked. His voice was quiet enough to disappear beneath the piano. Claire turned the folder slightly, covering the ink with her palm. Only if you stay to discuss it. The man near the bar changed direction. Claire saw it in the mirror. Vincent saw her see it. That was the first thread between them, not trust, not yet, but the knowledge that she had chosen his life over her own safety without knowing whether he deserved it. She lifted his empty dessert plate, and her hand trembled once against the porcelain. The sound was small. Barely a tap. Yet Vincent noticed. Claire steadied the plate against her hip and continued toward the service station. On the shelf beneath the register lay a narrow blue notebook, its cloth cover softened at the edges. She slipped the customer copy of the bill inside it, then paused with her thumb resting over the closed cover. For one breath, the calm left her face. Her eyes moved toward the kitchen door, where an older dishwasher was laughing softly with a young busboy, unaware of the man crossing the dining room. Claire closed the notebook and placed it beneath a stack of menus. Whatever happened next, she had just tied every person in that room to her decision. Vincent remained seated. Men in his world survived by distrusting warnings, gifts, apologies, and sudden kindness. Especially sudden kindness. His right hand settled beside the cold coffee. His left stayed near the folder. The exit Claire had indicated was behind a velvet curtain near the wine room, 12 steps away. The obvious route would expose him. The safer route required him to turn his back on a stranger with frightened hands and an unshaken voice. Claire returned carrying a silver coffee pot she did not need. She stopped at the table between Vincent and the approaching man. It looked like service. It was protection. You should move, she said, pouring coffee into a cup already full. Dark liquid spilled into the saucer. Her mistake drew the nearest diner's eyes toward the table and forced the man behind her to slow down. Claire accepted the stares without apology. The manager would blame her. The guests would remember her face. The gunman now would too. She had purchased Vincent 3 more seconds with the smallest public humiliation she could create. Vincent looked at the overflowing cup, then at the red mark barely visible beneath her fingers. Why? He asked. Claire placed the pot down carefully. Because no one should die while deciding whether kindness is a trap. Something in his expression shifted, not softened, but fractured just enough for another possibility to enter. Behind Claire, a chair scraped against the floor. Her shoulders stiffened. She did not turn. Vincent had built his life by making others move first. By waiting until fear revealed their loyalties. By trusting only choices he controlled. But Claire Bennett had already surrendered control of what happened to her the moment she marked his bill. Vincent closed the folder, rose from his chair, and stepped toward the hidden exit, not because he believed the warning, but because, for the first time in years, he chose to believe the person who had risked everything to give it. The velvet curtain fell closed behind Vincent just as Claire lifted the silver coffee pot from the table. 12 seconds later, the shot came. It was not loud in the way movies promised. It was sharp, flat, and final. A crystal glass burst near Vincent's abandoned chair. Someone screamed. A waiter dropped beside the service station, more from shock than injury, and Claire moved toward him before the room. Understood what had happened. Vincent stopped in the narrow passage behind the wine room. He could have kept walking. The rear exit was 6 steps away. Instead, he turned back. Through the gap in the curtain, he saw Claire kneeling beside the fallen waiter, pressing a folded napkin to a shallow cut on his forehead while guests pushed toward the main doors. The man near the bar was already gone. Claire. Vincent said her name once. She looked up. Relief crossed her face so quickly he might have imagined it, then vanished beneath professional calm. You were supposed to leave. So were you. He stepped into the dining room, drawing frightened eyes toward himself. Claire's manager rushed forward, pale and furious. What did you do? His gaze dropped to the spilled coffee, the broken glass, the empty table. Nothing, Claire said. Vincent watched her accept the blame before anyone could connect the warning to her. The choice protected the staff, but it also left her alone beneath the manager's suspicion. She followed my instruction, Vincent said. The lie changed the room. The manager's anger folded instantly into caution. Claire rose slowly. That is not what happened. It is what they need to hear. Her eyes sharpened. Gratitude weakened. Distrust replaced it. Vincent had shielded her by using the same power that made people fear him, and she did not mistake control for kindness. The injured waiter caught Claire's sleeve. My daughter is waiting outside. Claire handed him the napkin and moved toward the front entrance. Vincent blocked her path. The man may still be nearby. And a 12-year-old girl is alone on the sidewalk. For a moment, neither yielded. Claire had saved his life. Now she was asking him to value someone else's fear as urgently as his own. Vincent removed his overcoat and held it out. Cover the uniform. She hesitated, then took it. The dark wool nearly swallowed her small frame. It carried the faint scent of cedar and cold rain. As she pulled it closed, the edge of the blue notebook showed beneath her apron. Vincent recognized the softened cloth cover from the service station. He reached toward it, then stopped before touching her. The bill is in there. Claire's hand closed over the notebook. It is mine. It is evidence. It is the reason every person in this room is still being treated like a person instead of a witness. Vincent lowered his hand. It was a small retreat, but Claire noticed. Together they crossed the lobby, not as allies, but no longer as strangers. Outside, the waiter's daughter stood beneath the awning, crying silently into a backpack. Claire knelt and wrapped Vincent's coat around the girl's shoulders before guiding her inside. Vincent watched his protection leave Claire's body and settle around someone more vulnerable. She had chosen again, and the price was visible in the way she shivered. Sirens approached in the distance. Claire looked at him. When they ask, tell them the truth. The truth will put your name in the wrong hands. A lie will put everyone else beneath yours. The words landed harder than the gunshot. Vincent glanced through the window at the frightened staff, then at the girl clutching his coat. He had spent years deciding which truths other people were allowed to survive. This time, Claire gave him no command, only a choice. He took the bill folder from his pocket, placed it in her hands, and stepped toward the arriving officers. Then we tell it together. The officers separated them before either could decide what "together" would cost. Vincent answered first, giving only what he had seen and nothing that would turn the staff into targets. Claire listened from across the lobby, the blue notebook pressed against her ribs. When an officer asked how she had noticed the man near the bar, she did not mention instinct. She pointed to the mirrored wall, the untouched coat button in his reflection, and the way his shoes faced the exit while his body faced Vincent. Small details. Ordinary details. Vincent watched the officer's skepticism fade, then return when Claire admitted she had never seen the man before. Her precision impressed him. Her restraint unsettled him more. She knew enough to save him, but not enough to explain why she had been watching so carefully. When the manager began listing Claire's mistakes, she did not defend herself. She corrected only one thing. The spilled coffee was mine, she said. The broken glass was not. The distinction seemed useless until the officer looked again at the angle of the shattered crystal and realized the shot had come from farther left than anyone assumed. Claire had not solved anything. She had simply protected the truth from being flattened into convenience. Vincent saw the choice for what it was. She would rather be blamed accurately than praised falsely. The officer asked to see the notebook. Claire's hand tightened around it. Vincent expected refusal. Instead, she opened it herself and removed the bill, keeping the notebook closed against her palm. On the inside cover, visible for less than a second, a faded receipt had been stitched beneath clear tape. 3 words were circled in blue ink, old enough that the paper had yellowed. Vincent could not read them. Claire covered it before he could try. The officer took the warning bill. "Why keep the customer copy?" he asked. Claire glanced toward the waiter's daughter, still wrapped in Vincent's coat. "Because people forget what fear makes them choose." The room went quiet around that answer. Vincent did not ask what the older receipt meant. Not yet. He only noticed that Claire's thumb remained over it, as though holding something in place. Then the first move came from outside. The restaurant's phone rang. The manager answered, listened, and looked directly at Claire. A private number had asked whether the waitress who spilled the coffee was still inside. No threat. No name. Just a question designed to make everyone understand that she had been seen. The manager stepped away from her at once. 2 employees followed. The distance opened faster than panic. Claire closed the notebook and slipped it beneath her apron. Vincent moved toward her, but she raised one hand. "Do not make me part of your world. You became part of it when you marked the bill." "No," her voice stayed low. "I became responsible for one choice. Do not turn that into ownership." The words stopped him. Every instinct he had called for: guards, cars, locked doors, and control. Claire saw the machinery beginning behind his eyes. She looked toward the kitchen instead. The staff needed calm more than she needed protection. She crossed the room, returned the waiter's daughter to her father, then helped the busboy gather fallen silverware because his hands would not stop shaking. Each small act restored something the gunshot had taken. Vincent watched her kneel beneath the gaze of people already blaming her for their danger. Her competence was not a performance. It was discipline under pressure, and it cost her belonging. When she stood, no one moved closer. Vincent removed his phone but did not call his men. "What do you need?" he asked. Claire looked at him differently then, not with trust, but with the first recognition that he could choose restraint. "A ride for every employee," she said. "Separate cars. No names exchanged. And you leave before I do. That puts you last. It keeps them from thinking I traded their safety for mine." Vincent's jaw tightened. Her plan was careful, believable, and impossible to accept without giving up control. He made the arrangements exactly as she asked. One by one, the staff departed. With each car, Claire lost another witness and Vincent surrendered another layer of power. At last, only they remained beneath the dimmed lights. The restaurant phone rang again. Claire did not answer. Vincent looked at the door, then at her. "Come with me." She touched the blue notebook beneath her apron. "Not as your prisoner. As the person who saved my life." Claire held his gaze for a long moment, then stepped away from the counter. "One night," she said. "One car. And no lies." Vincent opened the door for her, knowing her condition would cost him more than protection ever had, and followed her into the rain. Vincent's car moved through the rain without sirens, escorts, or conversation, because Claire had made those the terms of entering it. She sat beside him with the blue notebook held against her coat, watching the city slide across the darkened windows. When the driver turned toward a private garage beneath a stone building, Claire leaned forward. That is not my neighborhood. It is secure. That was not the agreement. Vincent studied her reflection. Most people entered his world by accepting whatever protection he offered. Claire entered by refusing to surrender the right to leave. He told the driver to stop beneath the awning of a closed pharmacy. Rain traced silver lines down the glass. Someone called the restaurant asking for you, he said. Going home would be careless. Claire looked at the empty sidewalk. Her fingers tightened around the notebook, then loosened. Staying with you would make every person there believe I chose your protection over theirs. You already chose their safety. That does not mean they know it. Vincent removed his phone and placed it between them. On the screen were the names of the restaurant employees, each marked safely delivered. He had followed her instructions without changing them. Claire read every name. When she reached the injured waiters, her thumb paused over the glass. Only then did she hand the phone back. Thank you. The words were quiet, but they cost her something. Vincent accepted them without turning them into debt. I can give you money, a new apartment, people outside your door. Then I become the reason danger follows them. You are already the reason it missed me. Claire met his eyes. Do not confuse gratitude with ownership. His hand closed around the phone, then slowly opened. The movement was small, but she saw the effort inside it. He had spent years answering fear with control. This time, he let the silence stand. What would you accept? He asked. Claire looked down at the blue notebook. The corner of the old receipt beneath its cover had lifted in the damp air. She pressed it flat with one careful finger. Vincent looked away before the gesture became an intrusion. I want to return to work tomorrow, she said. That is not safe. Neither is disappearing. If I vanish, everyone who saw me will wonder what I told you. They will become useful to whoever made that call. Her reasoning was precise, but her voice faltered on the last word. She glanced toward the rain, where the pharmacy window reflected her face beside his. For the first time, they appeared to belong to the same problem. You are afraid, Vincent said. Claire did not deny it. She placed the notebook in her lap so he could see both her hands. Fear is not permission to abandon people. Vincent looked toward the driver. One command could remove her choice. Instead, he asked, what would returning require? Claire answered slowly, building the plan from what she knew rather than pretending certainty. No guards inside. No visible cars. No questions for the staff. Vincent could send one person to watch the street, but that person would answer to her if customers felt threatened. She would accept no payment. She would give no interviews. She would return in the same uniform and finish the shift she had left incomplete. Each condition reduced Vincent's control and increased Claire's responsibility. And if I refuse? He asked. Then I walk home now. Vincent glanced at the rain. Claire opened the door. Cold air entered the car. Her courage was not effortless, her hand shook against the handle. Vincent reached across her, not to stop her, but to pull the door closed before the rain struck her face. I agree. Claire remained still. To all of it? To enough that you can decide whether I mean the rest. That answer changed something between them. Not trust. The possibility of earning it. The next morning, Claire returned to the restaurant. The manager avoided her eyes. Two servers fell silent when she entered. She tied on her apron anyway, placed the blue notebook beneath the register, and began setting tables. Vincent watched from across the street inside an unmarked car. He saw her replace a chipped cup, steady the busboy's trembling tray, and serve coffee to the same people who had stepped away from her the night before. No one thanked her. She did it without needing them to. Then the restaurant phone rang. The manager listened, covered the receiver, and stared at Claire. The caller knew Vincent had arranged the staff's rides. He also knew Claire had returned. Vincent entered before fear could scatter the room again. Claire looked at him, anger and relief arriving together. "You promised no presents inside. I promised you would decide whether I meant the rest." He placed his phone on the counter. Every employee's address had appeared in a message from an unknown number. Claire understood the choice before he spoke it: leave with him and accept responsibility for the lives now tied to hers, or remain and let the threat use the restaurant as leverage. She untied her apron, folded it once, and placed it beside the blue notebook. "I am coming," she said. "But they come first." Vincent picked up the notebook without opening it and handed it back to her. "Then show me how to protect them without becoming the thing they fear." Claire did not ask where Vincent was taking her until the car stopped beneath a narrow brownstone with one light burning above the door. There were no guards outside, no marble lobby, no visible sign of the power attached to his name. Vincent unlocked the door himself. "The employees will be moved from here," he said. "Only until the threat passes." Claire entered because the restaurant staff had already become part of the cost of saving him. Inside, 6 sealed envelopes rested on a plain dining table, each containing cash, temporary keys, and instructions for one employee. Claire read the first page, then crossed out 3 lines. "No one takes money without knowing what it obligates them to. It obligates them to stay alive. People hear debt before they hear kindness." Vincent watched her rewrite the instructions in simpler language: no repayment, no questions, no future contact required. She placed the injured waiter's envelope first. His daughter's backpack had left a small glittering thread on Vincent's coat, still folded over a chair. Claire removed it carefully and laid it beside the envelope instead of brushing it away. Vincent noticed the gesture but said nothing. Together, they checked addresses, medications, school schedules, and who could safely travel with whom. Claire caught mistakes his men had missed: an elderly cook could not climb stairs, the busboy shared custody of his younger brother, one server would refuse any apartment that did not allow her dog. None of the details were impressive alone. Together, they revealed what Vincent's protection had always lacked. He knew how to move people. Claire knew what they needed in order not to feel erased. When the final envelope was sealed, Vincent placed a plate of reheated pasta between them. Claire looked at the single fork. He opened a drawer, found another, and wiped dust from it with his sleeve. The room had been prepared for emergencies, not company. They ate at opposite ends of the table until Claire pushed the bread basket toward him. "You have not touched anything since the coffee." Vincent tore off a piece. "You notice too much." "Only when everyone else is trying not to." The answer left a silence neither rushed to fill. His phone vibrated repeatedly beside his plate. He turned it face down. Claire glanced toward a framed photograph on a shelf, Vincent younger, standing beside an older woman whose hand rested against his cheek. The frame had been cleaned recently, though dust covered everything around it. Claire did not ask who she was. She opened the blue notebook instead and wrote the name of each employee beside the place they would be staying. The old receipt beneath the cover slipped loose. Vincent caught it before it fell. 3 faded words were circled in blue: "Choose who remains." Claire took the paper from him, too quickly. One edge tore between their hands. She froze. Vincent released it at once. "I am sorry." No defense. No demand. He found clear tape in a kitchen drawer and placed it on the table without reaching for the receipt again. Claire repaired the tear slowly. When she finished, she slid the notebook toward the center of the table rather than hiding it beneath her coat. She did not explain the words. She simply stopped protecting them from his sight. Vincent looked at the repaired paper, then at the envelopes. For years, remaining had meant loyalty to him. Claire had spent the night showing him that people remained where their dignity could survive. His phone vibrated again. This time, the screen displayed a message containing photographs of every employee leaving the restaurant. Beneath them was one sentence: "Choose who remains." Claire saw it. The color left her face, but she folded the final envelope and aligned it with the others. They want you to choose between protecting them and protecting yourself. Vincent reached for the phone. Claire covered it with her hand. Do not answer while you are angry. His gaze dropped to her fingers. No one had touched his choices so directly in years. He could remove her hand, summon his men, and return to the methods that had kept him alive. Instead, he pushed the phone away. What would you do? Claire looked at the names she had written, then at the old receipt repaired beneath the notebook's cover. I would stop deciding whose life matters most. Vincent gathered the envelopes. Until that moment, he had believed Claire saved him because she could not ignore danger. Now he understood that she had seen the danger clearly and acted because she refused to let fear decide what kind of person she would become. He placed his private phone, his addresses, and the keys to the brownstone in front of her. Then no one moves unless we both agree. Claire stared at what he had surrendered. Accepting would bind her to every consequence that followed. She closed the notebook, left it beside his keys, and moved her chair to his side of the table. Both means you listen before you command. Vincent turned the phone toward her. Both means you stay when listening becomes dangerous. Claire picked up the first envelope. Then we begin with the people who cannot protect themselves. And for the first time, Vincent allowed another person to share responsibility for lives he had always treated as his alone. The first employee reached safety before the second envelope was opened, and that small victory cost Claire the only place where she still belonged. The restaurant manager called Vincent's private phone and told Claire not to return. No accusation. No anger. Only a careful voice protecting the staff from the woman danger had begun to follow. Claire stood beside the dining table with the blue notebook beneath her hand. She did not argue. She asked whether the injured waiter's daughter had eaten, thanked the manager for keeping everyone calm, and ended the call before her voice could change. Vincent watched her remove the restaurant key from her ring. She placed it beside the sealed envelopes, then continued matching people to safe locations as though she had not just lost the life she intended to return to. You can stop, he said. Claire aligned the next address card. They cannot. His phone lit again. A photograph filled the screen, the blue notebook resting beneath the restaurant register the previous morning. The message beneath it contained no demand. Just her name. Claire Bennett. The opposing force had stopped using the staff to reach Vincent. It had chosen her. Vincent reached for another phone. Claire closed her hand over it. No visible men. No retaliation. They know your name. They knew the employees' addresses because your protection moved them. The truth struck cleanly. His solution had created the map now being used against them. Vincent pulled his hand free, not roughly, but the distance returned at once. You think this is my fault? Claire looked at the restaurant key. I think blame wastes time people do not have. She opened the final envelope. The busboy's younger brother had nowhere secure to stay because their father had refused help from anyone connected to Vincent. Claire chose to call him herself. She gave no details about Vincent, no pressure, no promises. She only said the boy had protected frightened guests during the shooting and deserved one night without being asked to be brave. The father agreed. When Claire ended the call, Vincent's suspicion had become respect, but the success immediately closed another path. A new message arrived with a photograph of the father answering his door. Whoever watched them had anticipated Claire's compassion. They are learning how you choose, Vincent said. Claire's thumb pressed against the repaired receipt beneath the notebook's cover. Choose who remains. This time, she turned the notebook toward him rather than shielding it. Then we stop choosing alone. Vincent looked at the faded words, then at the restaurant key she had surrendered. He had believed protecting her meant removing her from danger. Now every attempt to control the field only made her choices more valuable to the enemy. There is one place they cannot reach without exposing themselves, he said. Claire understood before he named it, his home. Not a safe apartment. Not a guarded hotel. The private space no outsider entered and no employee knew. Accepting would protect her, but it would also tie her more visibly to him and make retreat nearly impossible. The staff stays separate, she said. No one is brought into your house because of me. Then you become the only target without distance. Better one exposed person than 6 families gathered behind the same walls. Vincent turned away. His hand rested against the back of the empty chair across from him, the chair no one had used before Claire moved it beside his at the midpoint of the night. For years, he had treated isolation as strength. Now protecting her required inviting danger into the one place where he had kept every human attachment out. You asked me to show you how to protect them without becoming what they fear, Claire said. This is the cost. Vincent removed a key from beneath his shirt. It was not on the ring with the others. He placed it beside her notebook. His fingers remained on it for 1 second too long. Claire did not take it immediately. Once I enter, they will use me to reach you. They already are. And if protecting me requires becoming cruel? Vincent looked at the key, then at the woman who had lost her work, her anonymity, and her way home because she had refused to let him die. He slid the key across the table. Then you decide whether I still deserve your warning. Claire closed her hand around it, accepting not safety but responsibility for the man behind the power. At that exact moment, every light in the brownstone went dark, and Vincent stepped between her and the window before either of them could pretend the choice had not already changed them. Vincent moved Claire away from the window as the emergency lights flickered red along the floor. His hand left her shoulder the instant she found her balance. No command followed. No men appeared. Whoever had cut the power knew the brownstone was almost empty because Vincent had honored Claire's demand to keep protection invisible. Their first shared victory had become the opening in the door. His phone lit with a single incoming call. He answered without speaking. A distorted voice gave him 2 locations. The restaurant, where 3 employees had returned for belongings, and the apartment where the waiter's daughter now slept. Vincent could secure one before the threat reached it. Then the line went dead. Claire opened his phone and studied the routes they had arranged together. The photographs sent earlier had taught the enemy which people she would place first. Her compassion had become their map. Vincent reached beneath the table and unlocked a narrow drawer. Inside rested a second phone and a list of names Claire had never seen. One call would bring men who would not ask permission before solving the problem. She understood the price before he touched the screen. You can stop them, she said. Yes. And become exactly what they expect. Everyone stays alive. Not everyone. Her eyes settled on him. Vincent's thumb hovered over the first name. The restaurant staff deserved protection. The child deserved protection. Claire deserved a world where kindness did not require cruelty to survive. He could preserve their lives by surrendering the part of himself she had taught him to question. Claire took the blue notebook from beneath her coat and opened it to the repaired receipt. Choose who remains. She tore the old paper free. The sound was small, but Vincent looked at her as though something irreplaceable had broken. Claire folded the receipt around the restaurant key she no longer needed and placed both in his palm. You taught people to fear what you might do, she said. Now let them fear what you refuse to become. Vincent closed his hand around the key. The phone rang again. This time, a photograph appeared, the waiter's daughter asleep beneath his coat. Beneath it was a demand for Claire to leave the brownstone alone. Their trust had become the weapon aimed between them. Vincent stepped toward the door. Claire blocked him. They asked for me. They want me to choose you. Then choose the others. I will not trade your life. And I will not let you trade your soul. The words left them facing the loss neither could name. Claire had entered his world to protect people from the cost of his power. Vincent had allowed her close enough to become the one person he could no longer sacrifice. She placed the blue notebook in his hands. For the first time, she gave it up willingly. Keep this until I come back. No, you said both means staying when listening becomes dangerous. Claire's fingers trembled once before she released the cover. Listen now. Vincent could summon violence and keep her beside him, or honor her choice and risk losing the person who had changed what survival meant. He deleted the list of names from the second phone. One by one. Every easy path vanished beneath his thumb. Then he sent the restaurant staff toward the child's apartment, combining the two groups in a public church shelter where witnesses and cameras made an attack costly. It was Claire's kind of protection, visible, human, and impossible to own. The response came immediately. The enemy sent an address and a photograph of the church entrance. They had anticipated restraint too. Claire reached for the door. Vincent caught her wrist, then released it before protection became possession. He removed the key to his home from her hand and replaced it with the restaurant key wrapped in the torn receipt. Come back as yourself, he said. Claire looked at the faded words, then closed his fingers around the house key instead. Make sure there is someone worth returning to. She walked into the dark hallway alone. Vincent remained behind with the notebook against his chest, having sacrificed the power that could force her to stay. Before the door closed, his phone displayed one final message: if she comes alone, the others live. Claire saw his face and understood the choice had changed. She stepped back inside, locked the door, and said, then neither of us gives them what they want. Claire placed the torn receipt beside Vincent's phone, then turned the blue notebook toward him. Beneath the faded words, pressed flat under clear tape, were dozens of old customer slips. Each carried a name, a small need, and a choice someone had made when fear entered the room. A cook who had stayed with a sick dishwasher. A stranger who had paid for a mother's meal. A server who had walked a frightened girl home. The notebook had never been a record of danger. It was a record of who people became when leaving would have been easier. Vincent looked at the first page again. Choose who remains. He had read the words as a command to decide who deserved protection. Claire had carried them as a reminder that remaining was something a person chose for others. She lifted the restaurant bill from the officer's evidence photograph on his phone and placed it beside the old receipt. Her red circle matched the faded blue one. Different nights. Different lives. The same decision. Vincent had believed she warned him because she had seen the gunman. Now he understood that observation had only given her the chance. The real reason was written across every worn page: Claire stayed. Even when staying cost her work, safety, belonging, and the right to remain invisible. His phone vibrated with another demand. The voice behind the threat wanted Claire outside and Vincent afraid enough to return to violence. Vincent opened the second phone, but this time he did not reach for the deleted names. He activated the recorder, placed both devices together, and answered on speaker. Claire said nothing. She slid the notebook between them, not as evidence, but as a boundary. Vincent looked at the faded receipt before speaking. Everyone leaves safely, he said, or every word you say reaches the police. The caller laughed and named the people Vincent had once used to solve problems quietly. The threat depended on his shame, his isolation, and the certainty that he would protect his power before protecting the truth. Vincent opened his contact list and sent the recording to the lead officer, his attorney, and every person whose loyalty had been purchased through fear. With 3 movements, he exposed the machinery that had kept his world intact. Claire watched his thumb pause above the final command. Sending it would protect the staff and destroy the silence around his empire. It would also cost him the authority, alliances, and identity he had spent years building. Vincent looked at her. Claire did not tell him what to choose. She moved her chair beside his, just as she had at the brownstone table, and left enough space for him to decide. Without being alone. Vincent pressed send. The caller disconnected. Within minutes, the church shelter received police protection, the employees were moved under official supervision, and the people threatening them lost the secrecy that made them powerful. No gunman was defeated in the street. No hidden savior arrived. The opposing force collapsed because Vincent refused to keep protecting the system it needed. The cost arrived just as quickly. Accounts froze. Allies stopped answering. Men who had once waited for his commands began cooperating to save themselves. Vincent removed the watch from his wrist and set it beside the notebook. Claire remembered how carefully he had controlled every second at the restaurant. Now he let time move without him. She repaired the torn receipt one final time, then placed it in his palm. Vincent closed the notebook and returned it to her. She shook her head. "It is not mine alone anymore." He opened to a blank page. For years, the book had preserved the quiet choices of ordinary people. Now Claire placed the restaurant key on the paper, and Vincent traced its shape with the same red pen she had used to save him. Beneath it, he wrote one name, Claire Bennett. Then he handed her the pen. She added his. Vincent had lost the world that obeyed him, but not the person who had taught him why anyone should remain. When the first police lights washed across the windows, he stood without reaching for control. Claire picked up the notebook and waited beside the door. "What happens now?" he asked. She looked at the two names sharing the final page. "Now you live like the choice mattered." Vincent opened the door, knowing he might walk through it alone, and Claire stepped forward with him. 1 year later, Claire set a leather bill folder beside Vincent Moretti's hand and held his gaze long enough for him to understand that this time, there was no warning inside. The restaurant had reopened with a repaired window, new crystal, and the same mirrored wall that had once caught the movement no one else noticed. Claire still wore the same black apron. The blue notebook still rested beneath the register. Vincent sat at the same table, but the chair across from him was no longer kept empty. He had arrived without guards, without the watch that once measured every second, and without the name that had made a room lower its voice. The investigations had taken his businesses, his influence, and years he would never recover. What remained was quieter. He had cooperated fully, accepted the consequences he could not undo, and directed what survived of his legitimate money toward the employees whose lives had been disrupted by his world. No plaques carried his name. Claire had insisted on that before she agreed to help distribute a single dollar. The injured waiter now managed the dining room. His daughter sat near the kitchen after school, doing homework beneath Vincent's old coat, which had been altered into a smaller one rather than returned. When she noticed Vincent, she lifted one hand. He answered with the same restrained gesture, asking for nothing more. Claire brought his usual coffee. It was hot this time. Vincent touched the cup, then waited until she sat across from him before drinking. A year earlier, he would have considered waiting a concession. Now it was simply how two people shared a table. "The cook still refuses the new apartment," Claire said. "He says the stairs keep him honest." Vincent almost smiled. "And the busboy? Finishing community college." She glanced toward the young man near the service station, where he was showing a new server how to steady a crowded tray. When a nervous customer dropped a glass, the busboy did not look toward the manager. He knelt, checked the customer's hands for cuts, and said, "The glass can be replaced." Claire heard the words and lowered her eyes to the notebook. The lesson had traveled without being announced. Vincent noticed too. He reached into his coat and placed a folded restaurant key beside his cup. It was the key Claire had wrapped inside the torn receipt on the night they believed trust might cost them everything. The manager had given it back to her when she returned months earlier, but Claire had left it with Vincent until he understood that remaining was not the same as possessing a place. "This belongs to you," he said. Claire looked at the key, then pushed it toward the center of the table. "It belongs where someone will use it for others." Vincent did not argue. He left it there between them. When Claire rose to clear the plate, he placed his hand over the bill folder. "Not yet." She paused. There was still a trace of the old caution in her eyes. Some distances had narrowed. Others had become part of the respect between them. Vincent opened the folder, wrote beneath the total, and closed it before handing it back. Claire carried it to the service station, where the blue notebook waited beneath a stack of menus. She opened the folder. In the space where she had once circled 3 words in red, Vincent had written 7, "Thank you for saving more than my life." Claire stood very still. Then she removed the customer copy, opened the notebook to the page bearing both their names, and placed the new bill over the faded receipt that read "Choose who remains." She did not tape it down. She left the page open. The waiter's daughter approached with a red pen in her hand and pointed toward an elderly customer searching his pockets near the door. Claire gave her the pen. The girl crossed the room, circled the amount on his unpaid bill, and quietly wrote, "Taken care of." At the table by the mirrored wall, Vincent watched her place the folder beside the old man's hand and wait until he looked up. Outside, rain softened the lights along the street. Inside, Claire closed the blue notebook, leaving the red pen between its pages, while the empty chair across from Vincent remained turned toward the room.